Last time I drove a Nissan Pathfinder, it was a very expensive version and I wasn't very impressed by the value on offer, but this is one of the cheaper ones, the STL. This one here has all-wheel drive and it is a far more approachable price point for this 8-seat family SUV. I'm going to tell you about it in this review, so if you haven't already, please subscribe and ring the bell. There's a lot to cover in this test, so let's get to it, hey? As I said, the last time I drove a Pathfinder was one of the most expensive variants, and to me it didn't quite stack up in terms of what you were paying versus what you were getting, and that still is the case for the high-grade models in my opinion, but Nissan has reintroduced some more affordable versions of this Pathfinder SUV, including the STL grade. This is that one. It is the all-wheel drive, this particular version, so it costs a little bit more than the entry-level one. That base model front-wheel drive is just under $60,000 before on-road costs. And remember, you're getting 8 seats, you're getting LED lighting around the car, you've got 18-inch alloy wheels, a space saver spare, there are 3 rows of seats with fabric trim, and you're also getting a touchscreen media system with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, a part digital instrument display, and some really nice features like climate control as well. So at this entry-level price point, I think you're getting a lot of SUV for your money and lots of family friendliness. We'll get to the interior stuff shortly, but let's talk about some alternatives if you're thinking about shopping in this $60,000 price point range. The market has changed a little bit since the Pathfinder came out. If you're looking for a 3-row SUV that's sizable and offers plenty of value for money, I think you can't go past the Hyundai Santa Fe. It is a fantastic SUV and the base grade starts at $55,500 and it's hybrid, so it is super duper fuel efficient. You can get it with all-wheel drive for $3,000 more on that base grade, so you are still getting a very, very good hybrid all-wheel drive SUV that uses a lot less fuel than this for less than $60,000. It's maybe not as big as this, but that might actually be in its favor after all. Otherwise, you should be going and having a look at the Kia Carnival. Now, I know it's not an SUV, but it is a very, very practical family vehicle with 3 rows of seats, excellent practicality when it comes to the boot space and the configurability of the cabin. It's really, really impressive, and there are a bunch of different versions available starting at a very approachable price point. So if you are after a big family bus, well, the Kia Carnival is probably the best bet on the market. Seriously though, this one does stack up so well if you are looking for an 8-seat SUV at this kind of money, but otherwise you might want to consider the Hyundai Palisade. So I've already said the Santa Fe is a good option. It's only got 7 seats, but if you need 8, then the Palisade could be a really good choice. It's available with petrol and diesel as well, and it is a bit more expensive, but it's a bit more of a premium player compared to the Santa Fe. There's a new generation version of the Palisade coming soon as well, so you might be able to get a good deal on the existing one. Would you choose any of those, or would you go with this? Let me know. The Pathfinder is one of the bigger SUVs on the market. It's just around 5 meters long, 2 meters wide, and it's almost 2 meters tall. So you need to be mindful of the size of this thing if you are planning to go park in underground lots, because that might be a consideration. Also a consideration is you do have keyless entry for this vehicle with an unlocker on this door handle, the passenger front, but you don't have them on the rear doors. So that's something you just want to keep in mind. Another thing that seems a bit strange, this particular test car, the little Nissan badges have all peeled off. That's probably a problem that they need to fix. Now, let's have a look at the back. I reckon it looks pretty tidy. That is one of the biggest text badges on the market. And before we check in the boot, I want to show you underneath. Yeah, you do get a space saver spare wheel, which is great to see. And we'll have a look in the boot now. It does have an electric tailgate, even on this entry-level grade. It's also got a bloody massive boot. Have a look at that. That's in 5-seat configuration, obviously. So if you are planning to buy this car as a 5-seater, primarily with bonus seats when you need them, it could be a really, really good choice for you. Underneath this section here, there is extra storage space, which is really practical. Very, very handy design, that. And you do have some really nice features up here, like shopping bag hooks on the sides. There's a little 12-volt port there as well. Some tie-down points for cargo nets. And I think that that is really handy. Again, another little shopping bag hook there too. And yes, you can see there is a light in the back as well, and that's where this middle center seat belt comes from, the ceiling. So yes, we'll get to the practicalities of that shortly, but let's have a look at it with these seats up. You can just easily pull them up like so with one hand, and it's not too difficult. Just adjust those levers. There is a bit of adjustability to that seat back as well. And you can see that you do have still a reasonable amount of space behind that third row if you are needing to use all 3 rows of seats. It's one of the best when it comes to boot space with the third row up. And if that's why you're buying this car, well, it does pretty good in that regard. All right, let's check out the interior of this entry grade version. Okay, so for a base model family SUV, I think that it feels pretty nice in here. It's not necessarily the plushest experience, but hey, remember what you're paying and what you're getting, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with what's on offer here. So there is a partly digital instrument cluster. That's the digital part in the middle there. It has a bunch of different configurability to the screens here. One thing you need to keep in mind, it will restart and show a screen every single time that you don't really want to see. You have to sort of jump across to the digital speedo each time you start the car up, which maybe it's just this car, but it really annoys me. And yes, you do have regular dials on the side there as well. Buttons on the steering wheel here are pretty easy to get your head around. That's your cruise control button, in case you're wondering. It's got that blue thing because it's supposed to tell you that it can do all sorts of steering and stopping and starting as well. You've got pretty conventional stalks too. So your wipers on this side, your blinkers and lights on that side, and you've got paddle shifters as well. Ooh, sporty. Now, over here, you've got a touchscreen media system with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Plus, that system also has plenty of other features, AM, FM, DAB, Bluetooth. There's plenty of usability to this screen. It's maybe not the greatest technology on the planet, but I think that it does the job, especially if you're the sort of person who's just going to use it with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, as I have this week. I've been pretty happy with it. You've got SatNav if you want it, but like I said, you'll probably end up using your smartphone mirroring more often than not, as I did. But yeah, I think that it's going to be pretty easy to get your head around. There are dials on both sides, so you got a volume dial there, a tuning dial and zooming dial there, and buttons down below to make things all the easier. Speaking of buttons down below, there are plenty of good buttons down here. So I'll just turn this air conditioning on. You've got dual zone climate control, a fan button to turn things up and down in terms of the ventilation. There's also temperature controls, of course. Heated seats in this model too, in this base grade, that's right. So that's pretty good. It's all very easy to get your head around, and I love that. Just be mindful that if you are trying to control the rear temperature, you have to use these buttons here, and it'll only work when the car is running. So that's something else to keep in mind. Here is where a phone charger should be, a wireless phone charger, but it isn't. It's just a tray to sit your phone. You've got USB ports there, but no wireless phone charger in this grade. You do have plenty of storage though, little caddy there for your keys. There's some cup holders there that fit bottles. There's a storage tray down below as well, so you could fit a handbag or something like that. A big covered center console bin too. And over here, there's a small shelf where you could put a smartphone or a wallet, and a decent sized glove box with books in it as well. Bottle holders in the doors, and these cloth seats. I mean, they aren't necessarily the most family friendly choice that you could make. Same for the back rows. And I mean, if they were fake leather, it would just add a little bit of easy wipe down factor. But hey, who knows how they'll hold up over a family life of punishment. They are manually adjustable seats as well, so don't go expecting memory settings for this seat. But on this side, you do have an electric seat adjuster, so you can tilt and slide using little toggles on the side of the seat, but no memory settings for this seat. So if you have a big height disparity between your partner and yourself, as I do, it could be a consideration that you need to keep in mind. Above, you've got illuminated vanity mirrors. The lights are up high, and you've also got a sunglasses holder there too. You do get a flicky mirror. Yes, not an auto dimming rear vision mirror, which is maybe another bit of a downer for the spec list. But hey, you can address some of those concerns if you spend a bit more on your Pathfinder. All right, let's check out the second row space. Okay, before I jump into the second row, I just want to show you these doors do open very broadly. So if you do have the more assertive type of child that likes to fling the door open, just be mindful. They are a big door and they do open a long way. So car park dents to other people could be a consideration. Okay, let's jump in and have a look at the space in here in this second row. I'll zoom out so you can get a bit more of a view and you can see for yourself, I've got plenty of space back here for me to stretch out and put my feet underneath the driver's seat. And the other thing about it is that you do have a really good view over the seats ahead. It has stadium seating, and that is a fantastic inclusion for kiddos because you get a really good view out the window. So obviously I'm a little taller than most, but if you're a little kid, that's about where you'd be sitting and you could see plenty out the window. My daughter loved it. In fact, she told me she could see heaps. Now, there are some really great inclusions when it comes to this car. You've got climate controls down here so you can adjust the fan speed, the temperature, the direction of where the air is going. And speaking of where the air goes, you do have these ceiling mounted vents, which is a really nice inclusion. There are lights up there. There are grab handles too. So you've got plenty of amenities in terms of the niceness factor for rear seat occupants. These seats have very good size map pockets on them as well. And you've got some USB charge ports down there. There are massive cup holders in the doors. Just have a look at those babies. And there's another little storage caddy grab handle thing there. And more storage down there for more bottles. So it is nailing the brief when it comes to the drink factor. Now let's have a look at the seat factor here. So interestingly, this car does have ISOFIX points in the window seats, for both window seats, but also in the middle. So you could fit a middle ISOFIX attachment point seat if you wish. And there's a flip down armrest with yet more cup holders and a little storage tray as well. So lots of configurability options in terms of the way that you can use this car, but also keep in mind that you do need to get into the third row more easily using this seat right here. You can do it with both, but let me show you this side because it's the one that probably most people will need to use because most people fit their child seat on that side, as I did this week. So here we go. There's a button down here. You just press that and look at that. It flips forward and folds for you. So you've got nice accessibility to the third row. There's even a little clip here so you can put the seatbelt out of the way if you can do it one-handed while you're trying to film. There we go. So that means you shouldn't trip over the seatbelt as you're getting into that very back row. Let me do that now and show you what the space is like. Again, yes, all right, here we go. Right, so that seat is set to the preset position. And yeah, my knees are hard up against it. But I mean, if you've got smaller kids, smaller than me, I'm 6 foot, remember, it won't be that big of a deal, I don't think. And there's actually a pretty decent amount of foot room there. There's heaps of headroom in the second row and a decent amount in the third row as well. Just be mindful that if you are gonna have 3 across the back, this is where your middle seat belt comes down for this middle seat in the very back row. So that is a consideration because if you've got tall units, that will get them on the shoulder and it won't be comfortable for them. Vents in the back, no grab handles though. Let me show you some of the other amenities back here. You do have more cup holders. This is one of the most cup holderiest cars on the planet, I have to say. There's ISOFIX points on this seat. So the passenger side rearmost seat has its own ISOFIX as well. So you've got 4 ISOFIX options in this car and it has a top tether there as well, obviously. But there are no other top tethers for these seats. So that might play into your considerations, but I do think that it is a very, very practical vehicle. And yeah, you've got the stadium view thing happening in the very back row as well. Now, let me show you, if you are in the back row and you want to escape, you press that button there. Look at that. That's pretty neat. I'm going to do it for this one as well. Ready? Here we go. Just zoom out. Yeah, so limousine spec. But yes, that gives you an idea that it is pretty easy to get yourself out of this car, even if it isn't that easy to get yourself in. The Pathfinder is a petrol V6 only proposition. If you're okay with that, fine. But if you're not, obviously you're gonna have to shop elsewhere. It has decent power and torque. 202 kilowatts, 340 Newton meters, and that is a reasonable amount of grunt for a family-friendly SUV like this. You do have to rev that engine, we'll get to that shortly, and it has a 9-speed automatic transmission. As I mentioned, you can get it with front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive if you wish, depending on which version you are choosing. Now, if you are looking to tow, you have 750 kilo unbraked towing capacity, and you'll see the braked towing capacity for the front wheel drive and all wheel drive models on your screen now. All right, let's go for a drive. No towing in this review though. The thing that stands out most to me when it comes to the Pathfinder is that it doesn't feel anywhere near as big as it is in terms of the drive experience. So it sort of shrinks around you. It's got nice, direct and light feeling steering in most situations. It can be a little bit heavier at lower speeds when you're parking, but it is a very, I guess, manageable car for urban day-to-day driving, as I've been doing over the past week or so, and I've been pretty impressed with the way that it's been handling the tasks that I've thrown at it. Obviously I don't have a big family, so I haven't been able to test it to that capacity, but if you are thinking, well, this is a good 5-seater, yeah, it'll do that job really well with plenty of boot space, or it could be a great family vehicle if you need all those rows of seats. One thing about that is that in this low spec version, there is no digital camera mirror. You can get that in a higher grade version. So basically when you look out the rear view mirror, you just get headrests. That's something you might want to keep in mind in terms of the visibility factor, but otherwise the visibility is pretty good in this car, and generally it's pretty easy to drive. The ride is really impressive, it's comfortable, it's well controlled, and it doesn't feel like it gets flummoxed by sharp edges or big bumps that much. It's sort of a hefty feeling thing on the road, and it has a pretty reassured ride character to it as well. And by hefty feeling, I don't mean that it feels heavy to drive necessarily. It does have a bit of that roly-poly factor to it, because it is, well, not a light SUV, obviously, but it does feel decent in terms of the drive experience generally. I think it's pretty easy to live with, and you'll get used to it pretty easily. In fact, I like the way it drives more than like a Toyota Kluger or something like that, so that's a bit of a plus in my mind as well. And part of the reason I like it is also because of this engine. Yes, it is a big V6, and while it might be all-wheel drive, this particular version, it can still spin those front tires very easily when you take away from a standstill. So you need to be mindful of that, because it can at times get a little bit unwieldy feeling when you do accelerate, particularly in the wet. It does have all-wheel drive, like I said, in this particular version, but it's like a based on the situation style all-wheel drive. So if it needs it, it will send a bit of torque to the rear axle to help you get out of trouble, but otherwise it'll primarily use front-wheel drive in most situations. The other thing about this engine is that it does have plenty of grunt. Yeah, so it gets along, there's no doubt about that. You won't want to be doing that kind of driving a lot because of the potential for high fuel consumption. We'll get to that in a second, but yes, it is a pretty zesty engine, and the 9-speed automatic transmission does mostly a pretty good job in my opinion as well. It's maybe not the smartest transmission on the planet, but it does harness the amount of torque and power on offer here pretty well. And while this doesn't have the most power and torque that you can get from a vehicle like this, I think that it does manage to offer the grunt that you need when you need it, and that's all you can really ask of it. Again, the big issue will probably be whether you think that it's going to be good enough in terms of slippery road situations and the all-wheel drive factor, but hey, maybe even just investing in a better set of tires would make a big difference to the drivability in those situations. But hey, let's talk about fuel consumption, because that's another massive consideration for this car. On your screen, you'll see the official combined cycle fuel consumption figure for the front wheel drive models of the Pathfinder. And now I'll show you what the all-wheel drive versions are supposed to use. So that's the official figure. That's what it should be able to achieve across a mix of driving, best case scenario, essentially. I haven't quite seen that good a number, but I have seen a pretty respectable number in this all-wheel drive model, which I've been doing the usual stuff with. Urban driving, a bit of freeway commuting, that sort of stuff, and also the daily errands as well. And the number on your screen is representative of what you might achieve if you aren't loading it up completely, because remember, I didn't use all 3 rows of seats all the time with this vehicle because my family's not that big. But if yours is, I think you can add a few digits to that fuel consumption expectation. Now, it can run on regular 91 RON unleaded, and there is also a decent sized fuel tank as well. But yes, you might get through those tanks pretty quickly if you're asking a lot of this engine. The Pathfinder achieved the maximum 5-star ANCAP safety rating in 2022, and it's got all the stuff you would expect to achieve that kind of score. Things like autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist detection. There's also junction detection. There's lane keeping assistance. There's blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert with rear auto braking as well. Plus, there's front and rear parking sensors, and a surround view camera is standard across the entire range now as well. Now, I think that it still offers plenty of amazing tech, and there's also usable and not interruptive tech too. So there is a speed sign recognition system, and it doesn't get on your nerves, and there's no driver monitoring camera either, so that is a plus in my opinion. And when it comes to the airbag coverage, you've got plenty. There's dual front side, full length curtain coverage going all the way to the 3rd row, and a front center airbag as well to prevent head clashes in the event of a side impact. Stacks up pretty well on the safety front, hey? Nissan Australia offers a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty, and that is pretty good for the class. Now, there are decent service intervals for this vehicle. You'll see them on your screen now. And there's also a couple of different ways that you can consider paying for your servicing. You can prepay if you wish in certain blocks, or you can just pay as you go. But if you do pay as you go, you will pay a few $100s extra over the life of the cap price servicing plan. Plus, keep in mind, if you choose a Nissan brand new, you also get a 5-year roadside assistance program. And if you were to decide to go through Nissan's financial services team to finance this vehicle, you could set the future value for it if you want to as well. And I think that it does stack up pretty well on the ownership front. For one of these big SUVs, I guess the biggest consideration in terms of running costs will actually be your petrol consumption. For a family car customer looking for an 8-seat SUV, you really can't go past the entry-level versions of the Pathfinder. It isn't perfect, but far out. It makes a lot more sense at this $60,000-ish price point than it does in the 80s. Tell me what you think about it in the comments section below. Would you go for an entry-level Pathfinder? Would you choose one of those alternatives I mentioned, or something else completely? I'd love to hear from you. If you haven't already, please subscribe, ring that bell, and stay tuned for much more family-friendly car coverage. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you when I see you.